Every Dior gown that has ever sparkled on a red carpet was made by hand. Some take over 900 hours. They can cost more than a house. And they are not made with a needle, at least not just a needle. There's another tool. Dior has depended on it for almost 80 years, and most people have never even seen it. This is how Dior really makes their dresses. 1947. Paris is still recovering from the war. Fabrics have been rationed for years, and then a man named Christian Dior does something outrageous. He launches a collection using enormous amounts of fabric in full, extravagant skirts. The fashion press calls it the new look, and the world goes mad for it. But the silhouette was only part of the story. Dior believed that after the war, couture had to bring back fantasy and luxury. He called embroidery one of the most beautiful things done by the hand of woman, and for his evening gowns, he pushed it further than anyone had before. He turned to the greatest embroidery ateliers in Paris, above all, Rebet, and together they created dresses inspired by nature, by water, by peacock feathers, by the gardens Dior loved since childhood. This is the Junon gown, 1949, petals of iridescent sequins on tulle, inspired by the plumage of a peacock, and Venus, grey tulle covered in scallop-shaped petals of paillettes, seed beads, and crystals, like waves in the ocean. Now look at the density of this work, thousands upon thousands of individual elements, all placed with absolute precision. How? How do you physically do this on a material as fragile as tulle? That's where the tool comes in. This is called a tambour hook, in French a crochet de Luneville. It is a tiny hooked needle set into a handle. It doesn't look like much. It certainly doesn't look like something that could create the most expensive dresses in the world. But this tool can do something a needle never could. With a regular needle, you apply one bead at a time. Thread up, pick up a bead, thread down, 2 movements per bead. Slow, laborious. With this hook, one movement. It plunges through the fabric, catches the thread with the bead already on it, pulls it through as a chain stitch. Done. Next. An experienced artisan can work several times faster than a needle embroiderer, and that speed isn't just impressive. In the couture world, it's essential, because here is a detail most people don't know. The embroidery ateliers of Paris often receive their orders from the fashion houses just weeks before a show, not months, weeks. So you need dozens of artisans working simultaneously, and they all need to be fast. But the real secret of this tool, the thing that truly sets it apart, isn't the speed. It's that you work blind. The entire time you are embroidering, you are working from the back of the fabric. You almost never see the front, the finished side, while you are creating it. Everything is done in reverse. Imagine painting a masterpiece from behind the canvas. That's what these artisans do every day for decades. And it's exactly this kind of hidden craftsmanship that I find so inspiring. These stunning gowns that seem to appear on the red carpet out of nowhere, they're actually the result of incredible skills that very few people know about. Skills that start with a vision on paper. Because before anyone touches this hook, before a single bead is placed, every Dior gown begins as a sketch, a drawing that captures the silhouette, the draping, the sparkle. If you have ever wanted to capture haute couture on paper yourself, there is a wonderful class on Skillshare, the beginner's guide to fashion illustration by Laurie Bird, that walks you through exactly that. Whether it's a professional tool for sketching your designs or simply a beautiful creative hobby, it's one of those skills you'll be glad you picked up. Skillshare has creative classes taught by world-class creatives, professional illustrators, renowned graphic designers, and successful entrepreneurs. It's the best place to pick up a new creative skill. Skillshare is where humans come to learn from other humans. The first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Now let me show you what happens next inside the Dior Atelier. So, a new Dior Haute Couture collection is being prepared. The creative director has approved the designs. Now the magic has to happen, and it has to happen fast. Here's how the process works. First, the design is translated into a technical drawing. Every single bead, every sequin, every line of embroidery is planned. The drawing is then traced onto the fabric in reverse because remember, the embroiderers work from the back with a tambour hook. Then the fabric is mounted onto a large frame called a métier, stretched tight like a drum. That's actually where the name tambour comes from, the French word for drum. Now the artisans begin, and here is where it gets extraordinary. The right hand holds the hook above the frame, the left hand works underneath, feeding thread and beads from below. Your two hands have to be in perfect sync, and you can't see your left hand, it's pure muscle memory. The thread runs continuously, it's never cut between beads. Every chain stitch locks the previous bead in place. This creates incredible efficiency but also incredible risk, because if one stitch is pulled out, an entire line of beads can unravel. And when multiple artisans are working on the same dress, which they often are because of the time pressure, they each embroider separate panels. When those panels are assembled, the embroidery has to flow seamlessly across the seams. If one person's tension is slightly different or their spacing is off by a millimeter, it's visible. It ruins the illusion. This is why the petites mains, that's what they call the artisans in Paris, literally little hands, train for years. You don't just learn the technique, you learn to match your hands to the hands of every other person in the room. Now that you understand how these dresses are made, let me show you what this tool has created across nearly 8 decades of Dior. We've already met these two, but now that you know about the tambour hook, look at them again. Junon, named after the Roman goddess Junone, the queen of the gods, the peacock was her sacred animal. Look at how the sequins shift in color across the petals, an ombre effect from green to blue to deep royal, just like real peacock plumage, and each petal overlaps the next, layered like actual feathers, creating a three-dimensional surface that catches light from every angle. And Venus, grey silk tulle covered in scallop-shaped petals meant to evoke the seashells of Botticelli's Birth of Venus. Each petal is embellished with opalescent sequins, iridescent seed beads, aurora borealis crystals, and pearls, 5 different types of embellishment layered together on tulle. When the light hits this dress, every element reflects differently. The sequins shimmer, the crystals throw tiny rainbows, the pearls glow soft. It's not just embroidery, it's an entire light show built into fabric. In 2016, Dior appointed the first ever female creative director, Maria Grazia Chiuri, and she changed the conversation around embroidery at Dior in a way nobody expected. She wanted couture to be lighter, more wearable. She said, "No woman today wants to wear a couture dress that is so heavy." So the work evolved, sometimes delicate and sparse embroidery rather than dense and all over, sometimes combined with hand-painted or printed fabrics. But what she did that was truly fascinating was take Dior's shows around the world, Seville, Mumbai, Mexico, and collaborate with local artisans. She found embroiderers in Spain who had only ever worked for churches. She worked with Indian artisans who use a version of this same hook called an ari needle in their own tradition. Because, and this is something most people don't know, the tambour hook isn't originally French. It came to Europe from India and Persia, traveling along trade routes. It was adopted and refined in the French town of Lunéville, and Curie reconnected those threads. bringing the technique back into dialogue with its global origins. And now a new chapter begins. In 2025, Dior appointed Jonathan Anderson as creative director, giving him responsibility for women's, men's, and haute couture, a unified role not seen at the house since the time of its founder. It marked a significant structural shift, placing the creative direction of the entire maison in a single pair of hands. His haute couture debut in January 2026 signaled the beginning of this new era. Critics noted how the collection felt almost like a cabinet of curiosities, a carefully assembled dialogue between past and present. Historical references were everywhere, silhouettes recalling the elegance of the 18th century, textiles that evoked the richness of antique French decorative arts, and surfaces animated by intricate handwork. Embroidery played a central role. Floral motifs appeared throughout the collection, including garments adorned with delicate pink blossoms rendered with exceptional detail and dimensionality. In menswear, embroidered coats suggested the grandeur of aristocratic wardrobes from centuries ago, translating historical ornament into a contemporary language. What made the work particularly compelling was not simply the presence of embroidery, but the way it was treated as a living tradition. Techniques developed long ago were not preserved behind glass. They were reactivated, interpreted, and placed back into motion through the hands of today's artisans. The ateliers are still there. The petites mains are still there. The tambour hook is still there. The tool has not changed. What we do with it continues to evolve. Before we finish, here are some things about Dior's embroidery that are almost never talked about publicly. The embroidery houses have their own archives, and they are massive. L'Usage, which has worked with Dior since the 1940s, has over 70,000 embroidery samples stored in their archives. When a new creative director arrives at Dior, they can visit these archives and look through decades of technique, pattern, and texture. It's like having the entire DNA of haute couture embroidery at your fingertips. The hook sizes matter more than you'd think. Artisans switch between different hook gauges depending on the thickness of the thread and the density of the base fabric. A thinner hook for very delicate threads and lightweight fabrics, a slightly stronger hook for thicker threads or more structured textiles. Choose the wrong hook and the fabric can tear instantly. There is no undo button. The gowns are often embroidered in pieces, not as complete dresses. The panels are embroidered flat on frames, then assembled. This means the embroiderers have to work with geometric precision, calculating exactly where the pattern needs to continue at the seam line so the beading flows without interruption. And finally, the price. A heavily embroidered Dior haute couture dress can cost well over 100,000 euros, and that price is largely determined by time. Some pieces require 900 hours or more of handwork carried out by teams of highly trained artisans. What you are paying for in haute couture is not just a garment, but thousands of precise movements of a small hook passing through silk bead after bead, hour after hour. That's what haute couture really costs: time, skill, and human hands.